For 300 years, the Principality of New Antioch has stood defiantly as the focal point of the Church and the faithful at the very edge of the shadows cast by the gate of hell. It is the home of all our hopes, the bulwark against heretic forces and the first line of defense against the devil's might. Should New Antioch fall, all of the Levant will be lost. War has never left this corner of the world. The ancient city of Antioch was destroyed by a mysterious weapon in the year 1545, but the faithful never gave up their positions in the ruins. Despite the lethal demonic essence emanating from the crater that was left behind, the garrison held on, even as mighty Constantinople fell to the legions of Cammarus, Marquis of Hell. Before it was destroyed, the ancient city of Antioch was always the first line of defense to be put to the test. Thus it is no wonder that in the year 1559 the Sword Congress of Vienna agreed to rebuild and fortify the city, and that a yearly tithe is to be sent to New Antioch by all the faithful nations, though this levy is rarely in the form of coin. Instead, endless supply trains of foodstuffs, tools, ammunition, weaponry, machinery, and skilled workers and engineers come from across Europa, the Mediterranean Sea, as well as the African dominions. Keeping the supply routes open is a constant game of cat and mouse, as heretic infiltrators and raiders harry the caravans and ships that allow the Principality to exist to this day. Since those days, New Antioch has grown to be the most important fortress city in the world, the sword and shield of Europa and Africa. All the princes of the church and heads of the various states and domains who oppose hell understand that it is better to fight their battles against the heretics away from their heartlands. To this day, New Antioch has withstood 8 great sieges, and its famed walls, with their 77 mighty towers, have never been breached. This is partly due to the hundreds of anchorites, metallic battle shrines with devoted entombed within them, that are embedded into the walls, keeping a vigilant watch day and night. More than anything else, it is the volunteers who come to serve under the banner of Christ that ensure the continuous existence of the Principality. Thus, in the streets of the city, one can hear hundreds of languages and dialects. One might observe hussars of the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth brushing shoulders with the last remnants of the Varangian Guard, or hear the sermons of a street preacher from Eire extolling the soldiery of Ethiopia to lay down their lives for the cause. Perhaps they might even witness the church engineers' procession taking their latest invention to be tested on the front lines. This all happens under the watchful eyes of the Office of the Propagation of Virtue that tirelessly patrol the streets. While they are quite happy to turn a blind eye to the revelries of soldiers, they ferociously persecute even the slightest deviation from church doctrine. The execution of heretics is a weekly spectacle that draws immense crowds. Factories spew black smoke as newly constructed tanks roll out of the workshops. Foundries burn white hot day and night in order to keep the artillery battalions, the pride and joy of New Antioch, at full strength. In the techno-laboratories of the city within the church, toils away in creating the superhuman communicants empowered by the cloned flesh and blood of the Redeemer. Thousands of workers give their lives in horrific accidents and overwork each year, and great statues celebrating their sacrifices stand in the city. Despite all these preparations, it is a grim reality that New Antioch could never withstand the full onslaught of the combined heretic forces. It is only thanks to the ferocious and bloody internal conflict amongst the archdevils that has allowed the Principality to stand to this day. The archdevils and princes of hell bicker and plot against each other, and only rarely does one of them gain supremacy for long enough to mount a full-scale invasion. Even though the war has stretched for centuries, with decades of nervous lull between great battles, the rulers of hell are immortal, and to them the war has barely existed as though at all. They are beings that have existed before there was time, and wish to savour the agony of the mortals who die in their millions, and thus the great war rages on, sometimes with long years of silence followed by sudden, ferocious assaults. As the nominal supreme commander of all the faithful armed forces, the Duke of New Antioch is a title of unbridled prestige and honour. But despite swearing fealty to the Duke, in reality troops who come to do battle against hell from across all of Christendom operate in units of their own, taking commands from their own leaders. It is worth noting that some soldiers renounce their citizenship and take up the cross and come to serve under Duke Constantine alone. Thus, the standing army of the Principality is the greatest single fighting force the faithful can muster, and those who serve on the walls of the Home of Hopes are rightfully proud of their livery. When the need is great, the Synod of Strategic Prophecy sends their famed observers to support the war effort. This order of warrior monks lives a life of absolute solitude, sharpening their minds and bodies to make them living weapons in the hand of God. Once a soldier joins the order, they very rarely leave the Temple of the Word, the only exception being when they are summoned to the battlefield, a situation where their unique abilities can decisively shift the balance in favor of the faithful. Even the slightest disturbance to their prayers or training will mean that they will not be able to commune with the Lord of all creation. Thus, the days of the observers are spent in secluded, cloistered cells when not practicing their martial or mental disciplines. Observers wear a specially crafted oculus helmet, enabling them to attune to the voice of God. This remarkable connection grants them the capacity to simultaneously perceive the immediate past, present, and future to a degree. This allows them to perform martial feats unrivaled. But a living human is not meant to hear the holy words, so it comes at a cost. Since the voice of God never decays, they must concentrate with superhuman focus to extricate the righteous guidance amidst the narrative spanning from creation's inception to the present moment. The resonance of the divine echo, ringing ceaselessly in their ears, renders sleep impossible. Therefore, they must resort to potent sedatives and mind-altering drugs for them to endure the heavy burden of their battlefield role for any length of time. The observers diligently practice recitation of the words of God, granting them the power to issue commands to anyone they address, friend or foe. The special metal of their helmet allows them to replicate the holy word as closely as possible, compelling any creature in creation to obey them momentarily to a degree. Though they master many weapons, the trench polearm stands as the preferred choice for observers. This tool allows them to skillfully vault over barbed wire and drop into enemy trenches with devastating force. Guided by the omniscient words of the Almighty, they possess the ability to evade nearly any strike. With proper focus, they foresee impending attacks within the crystal of the eye of God that is incorporated into their helmet. As such, enemies' efforts to take them down are often frustrated, since the observer simply moves the minimum required amount to avoid any harm, knowing precisely where the blow of the heretic was going to land. However, even the slightest slip in their concentration means that they might lose the voice of God that guides them, rendering them just as vulnerable to death as any other mortal soldier. Since the beginning of the Great War some 800 years ago, the faithful have faced a problem that is seemingly impossible to overcome. They are unable to take the battle to the enemy. For such is the supernatural power of the open gate to hell that even approaching within sight of it is impossible for all but the most strong-willed and pious. Within the inferno await domains of the lost and legions of devils. But in utmost secrecy, the Church produced an answer to this quandary: the Paladin program. Paladins are by far the greatest creations of the Mentalist order. They are near perfect communicants, for in their veins flows the purest blood that the Metachrist program has been able to produce. Paladins are warriors with such physical stature and inner holiness that not only can they approach Jerusalem's Vale of Tears, but they can enter the very gates of Inferno and undertake missions within hell itself, and return to tell the tale. Each is said to represent near perfection in human form, both mind and body, though much scarred and burned from the long centuries of war that they have been forced to endure for the sake of all creation. Paladins reside in secluded cells within a secret wing of the Castle St. Angelo, until the hour comes and the Council of Saints sends them forth to do battle. In such time, the Paladin emerges from their seclusion, they go to their arming chamber and kneel at the centre of the mosaic of the militant Christ the Lion. They are then armed and armoured by blinded and gelded serfs, for no impure gaze or carnal desire is to fall upon the Paladin by the servants of the Church, and briefed on their mission by one of the cardinal generals. They are given the last rites prehumously should they fail, for there is no mission more dangerous than war within Gehenna. Originally, there were 12 paladins, but now only 9 remain. 2 have fallen in battle, and it is rumoured that one has turned traitor, though the church vehemently denies such slander upon pain of death. Despite ceaseless efforts, the Holy Mentalist Order have been unable to produce even a single new paladin in the last 3 centuries. It has proven just as difficult to replace their holy armour and weaponry. Since the destruction of the holy city of Jerusalem, it has not been possible to harvest more Golgothic techites required for the machining process for the paladin's armaments. Thus, their elaborate suits of armour, despite the fastidious care of the dicastery of the service of church militant disciples, are much scarred, burned and corroded, and many pieces of the armour have been slated to be reforged in a vain hope that even the tiniest shard of the required materials could be recovered. Thus, each paladin is forced to endure searing pain like no earthly suffering where their armour has weakened, relying on their unshakable faith during their lonely crusades into perdition. Each of the 9 circles of hell has its own foul atmosphere and deadly environment, from noxious fumes to burning heat or bitter coldness below absolute zero, requiring a specific suit of armour to withstand the infernal elements. Thus, when a paladin enters the gates of hell, they know they must succeed alone or die trying. No help will be forthcoming, not even from one within their own order. Paladins are used only under the orders of the Council of the Saints, and even then extremely sparingly. Each mission they undertake must bring great and tangible benefits for the Church and the overall war effort, and its long-term benefit must be determined by the synod of strategic prophecy. Paladins are tasked with missions such as exterminating key nobles of hell, destroying laboratories creating some new devastating variant of the Black Grail, or interrogating devils with holy fire and the blood of the Lamb until they give up their infernal plans. The lieutenants of New Antioch are leaders of small squads or platoons of soldiers, playing a fundamental role in the distant front lines of the Trench Crusade. They display unwavering resolve in preserving the unity and morale of their troops. Lieutenants might be the favoured son or daughter of a noble family, or gained their rank by impressing their superiors with their exceptional strategic acumen and audacious bravery. In addition to their command role, they are also responsible for acquiring new weapons, arms, equipment, and food for their troops. All too often, this requires looting the battlefields of no man's land, or even raiding settlements, since resupply can be sporadic at best. Having rightfully earned their positions, New Antioch holds no space for anything but meritocracy. Lieutenants can enjoy the privilege of selecting their preferred arms and armour, often with the pick of the rarest battlefield finds. It is not uncommon for a lieutenant to wield a distinctive weapon, perhaps a family heirloom, an idiosyncratic affectation, or an ostentatious piece providing some much needed swagger. The specialist troops of New Antioch are fueled by fervour as much as by martial discipline. The trench cleric is a holy warrior who looks after the souls of the soldiers in his company. The cleric chants inspiring battle prayers, can perform various miracles such as healing or even smiting the enemy. Clerics often carry a portable shrine on their back to denote their faith in the company's patron, be that one of the saints of their homeland, a mighty archangel, or even the Lord himself. Meanwhile, the sniper priests are so devoted to the church that they ritually blind themselves as devotion to God, using only their faith to strike the enemies across the battlefield. During the siege of St. Lux, stories were told of a sniper priest killing a target up to 3 miles away. Even the most basic soldier of New Antioch is likely to be more heavily armed and armoured than his enemies. A basic trooper of New Antioch, the yeomen, are brave men and women who have received standard training and sworn an oath to the Duke of New Antioch. What they lack in combat skills compared to more elite troops, they more than make up with their numbers and a wide selection of weapons that are available to them. Assault troopers specialize in attacking enemy defense positions. They're masters of rapid assault and melee combat. They're experts at combined arms and fireteam tactics. They will often put themselves at tremendous risk in order to gain an advantage, driven on by faith and fervour to take advantage of any means they can to defeat their enemies. Combat engineers specialise in destroying bunkers, discovering minefields, and building battlefield emplacements. Equipped with close combat weaponry and steel body armour, casualties are extremely high in the combat engineer units, but they consider it an honour to fight and die for New Antioch and the Church. Finally, the mechanised heavy infantry are well armoured, large soldiers who wield heavy weaponry of the company. They are selected from amongst the best, and are given heavy chemical enhancements to advance their place on the battlefield. The Sisters of St. Cosmas are a highly trained elite medical corps, specialising in battlefield first aid and surgeries on the front lines of the Great War. The Sisters take a modified Hippocratic oath that compels them to help any wounded soldiers of the faith, no matter how dire the circumstances, as well as dispatching heretics and other enemies they find on the battlefield with neither pity nor mercy. Armed with a combat surgical knife that doubles as a misericordia, they are as equally adept at saving lives as taking them from those they find lying wounded in no man's land. They carry large medical kits with a plethora of battlefield drugs that are especially useful for nullifying the pain or even the ghastliest wounds and getting soldiers back on their feet and back into the fray, even if just for a few moments so that they can accomplish their mission, or die trying. Due to the widespread reach of New Antioch and the flood of faithful from all around the world, they are capable of putting many various types of warbands onto the battlefield. The Papal States Intervention Force, who all operate under the command of the Supreme Pontiff of Rome rather than the Duke of New Antioch, are sometimes dispatched to the front lines to perform a specific duty, such as hunting down and eliminating dangerous heretic leaders, or recovering artifacts of great spiritual importance. These warbands are typically quite small, but they have access to extremely elite soldiers and specialist equipment. They are led by utterly devoted warrior monks that are hand-picked by the Pope himself. As a stronghold of the Church and an ancient centre of learning, Eire provides the world with the Eire Rangers. Due to the constant and devastating raids of the heretic navy, they are bitter enemies of the infernal forces. The Emerald Isle has endured hunger and been ravaged by the Black Grail, as well as a full-fledged invasion aimed at destroying the famed House of Manuscripts, where many of the holiest of texts are kept. After this century of ruthless battles and brutal guerrilla warfare against the invaders, the warriors of Eire are now masters of skirmish fighting, hit-and-run tactics, and ambushes. Elite Fianna warriors, hunters, are especially adept at these guerrilla tactics. They uphold the ancient tradition of a band of roving warriors living off the land. While seen as troublemakers and godless hellraisers, they are nevertheless expert skirmishers, and easily find employment in the warbands who take the cross and travel to New Antioch to strike back at the enemy. These warriors adorn themselves with grisly trophies in the manner of their pagan ancestors, carrying skulls of the vanquished, much to the irritation of the Church. Due to the ravages of the wars, the island nation has few resources for heavy armour or most intricate automatic weapons, but they more than make up for this with their skilled light infantry and knowledge of the lay of the land. So when the poet King Tig O'Connor dispatches his famed rangers to aid the Principality of New Antioch instead of paying the yearly tithe of Vienna, the Duke is more than happy to accept these fierce warriors instead. A rare latent berserker trait runs in a few warrior bloodlines of Eire. It can be made to manifest with the chemical communion of the blood of the Metachrist. Such fighters enter a state of battle rage, where no bullet or blade seems to cause them any harm. When the need to take out an enemy strongpoint or assault an especially powerful defensive line of trenches or redoubts arise, the Duke of Antioch often calls upon the famed stormtrooping forces of the Free State of Prussia. These elite units often operate in deep forward positions, and quite often they carry secret orders or specific missions from the princes of the church or the New Antioch High Command. The Free State stock troopers are selected and trained specifically to perform lightning assaults, master the firearms of close assaults, and operate in fire teams that are perfectly synchronized in their combined arms tactics. Admittance to this elite group is strictly by merit. All members must be decorated athletes, under 25 years of age, unmarried, and must have demonstrated a high level of aggression on the battlefield. Of all the soldiers serving Prussia, Stormtruppen have by far the highest casualty rate. When inducted into the ranks, all swear an oath to the Königsberg Cathedral. To each his own, to me, death. Finally, the Kingdom of Alba assault detachments hail from the Scottish Highlands where the church is strong. These men and a few fierce women come to New Antioch in search of both glory, forgiveness of their sins, as well as dreams of acquiring valuable loot to send back to their island home, but above all to get their hands on some devil worshippers up close and personal. The heretic submarine fleet harries the shores of the kingdom constantly, carrying off their young in chains to be sacrificed in the dark altars of the Archdevil, and their hatred of Hell's forces run deep. The fleet of Britain and their famed moving fortress are reserved in guarding their own shores, causing friction and resentment among their northern neighbours whose coastal defences are far less comprehensive. As is the tradition in Alba, these warbands favour close quarters combat, and fierce charges over defence and long range attacks.